The Girl by the Station. The night was cold enough to make Thomas's breath fog in front of him. He tugged his coat tighter and hurried along the wet pavement, wishing the late train had been on time. The streets were almost empty, save for the dim glow of the station lamps and the glistening sheen of rain on cobblestones. That's when he saw her. She sat under the arch of the station, knees drawn to her chest, clutching a small canvas bag. Her clothes were threadbare, her hair tangled and damp. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking at him, just staring out at the rain as though it were the only thing in the world worth watching. He almost kept walking. People in London passed strangers all the time, each locked in their own small universe. But something about the way she sat, quiet, still, dignified, made him slow down. "You'll freeze out here," he said. She looked up, startled, eyes a pale hazel that seemed too old for her young face. "I've nowhere else to go," she replied softly. He hesitated, then nodded and moved on, but her voice stayed with him all the way home. The second meeting. 2 nights later, she was there again. This time, she was sketching in a small notebook with a stub of pencil. The light caught her face, delicate features, hollowed by hunger. Without thinking, he approached. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "Nothing much," she said, turning the page slightly away. He handed her the paper bag he was carrying, a warm pasty from the bakery. "Here. I've already eaten." She hesitated, then took it. "Thank you. Thomas, isn't it?" He blinked. "How did you?" "You told the ticket man the other night," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm Isla." Small X. Over the next week, Thomas found himself taking the long way home just to see if Isla was there. Sometimes she was sketching, sometimes just watching the world go by. She told him she'd been sleeping rough for nearly a year. Her parents had died within months of each other, and with no family willing to take her in, she drifted between shelters, park benches, and the occasional kind stranger's sofa. She never asked for money. The only thing she seemed to want was conversation, and perhaps the warmth of being seen. One evening, the wind was sharper than usual, cutting through his coat. Isla's thin jacket looked barely able to keep out a summer breeze. "You can't stay out here tonight," Thomas said. "Come to mine. I've a sofa you can use." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm not, if you're expecting." "I'm not," he said quickly, flushing. It's warmer than this." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "A place to stay." Thomas's flat was modest, 2 small rooms above a bakery, but it was dry and warm. He handed her a towel and one of his jumpers while he made tea. She curled on the sofa, cradling the mug as if it were treasure. "You don't have to talk," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "You're different." That night, she slept curled under a blanket. He lay awake, wondering what he had just invited into his life. A hidden gift. A few days later, while Thomas was working at the kitchen table, Isla sat quietly with her notebook. She eventually slid a page across to him. It was a sketch of his face, not stiff or formal, but alive, full of little details he hadn't realized she'd noticed. "You did this?" he asked, amazed. "It's what I do," she said with a shrug. Over the next week, he saw more of her work, streetscapes, portraits, quick studies of strangers. They were remarkable. He began to think she had something rare, something worth sharing. The plan. It was Isla who suggested trying to sell them. She'd done it before, she said, but never seriously. Thomas helped her get a stall at Camden Market on Saturdays. At first, it was slow. People looked, nodded, moved on. But gradually sales came. A couple bought 2 portraits. A shop owner commissioned her to draw his storefront. By spring, she was making enough to contribute to expenses, though Thomas refused to take her money. "You're investing in yourself," he told her. "This is just the start. Building something together." Their little venture grew. Thomas took care of the finances and paperwork, freeing Isla to focus on her art. They started an online shop, then landed a small gallery exhibition. The opening night, Thomas watched strangers linger over her work, murmuring about raw emotion and story in the lines. By the end of the evening, nearly every piece had sold. From there, things accelerated. A journalist wrote about the homeless girl whose art stole London's heart. Commissions poured in. Isla began teaching weekend classes at a community center. Within 2 years, they had a proper studio and enough savings to buy a small house. Love, without saying the word. They never spoke of love at first. But it was there, in the way he always made her tea before she asked, and in the way she left little sketches of him in his desk drawer. It was in the quiet moments, shared glances at the market, laughter over burnt toast, the comfort of silence that didn't need filling. One evening, on the balcony of their flat, Thomas said, "You've changed my life." Isla's smile was soft. "You changed mine first." The Paris offer. A wealthy Paris art dealer approached them with a proposal, an international exhibition. It was a dream, but it needed funding they didn't have. "It's risky," Isla said. "You're worth the risk," Thomas replied. They borrowed the money. The exhibition was a triumph. Not only did her work sell, but she was commissioned for a series of portraits worth more than either had imagined. The business expanded internationally, and Thomas left his job to manage it full-time. Success and memory. 5 years after that rainy night at the station, Thomas stood in the kitchen of their renovated townhouse, watching Isla brew coffee in paint-spattered clothes. She was still herself, no pretense, no airs. They weren't just comfortable, they were wealthy. But Thomas never forgot the girl who had once shivered under the station arch. One evening, he asked, "Do you miss anything from before?" She thought a moment. "Only the part where I didn't know how much better life could be." Giving back. With success came the chance to help others. Isla started a fund for young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. They ran workshops, donated supplies to shelters, mentored teens who reminded Isla of herself. "This," she told Thomas one night, "is the best thing about being rich." He agreed. Full circle. Every year, on the anniversary of their first meeting, they went to the station and stood under the arch, remembering the rain, the cold, the quiet exchange that had changed everything. It had started as a small act of kindness. It had grown into a partnership, a fortune, and a love built not on glamour, but on shared dreams and stubborn belief in each other. And though the city had changed, and they had changed, the memory of that first night remained, the beginning of everything.